This is Intermediate Accounting 2 class. We are now in Chapter 6, Employee Benefits Part 2. Hi there, I'm Romualdo Fernandez Credo, your teacher for this semester. So if you're ready, please get a pen and a paper for your notes. Let's start. The following are the topics learning competencies. Number 1. State the accounting procedure for defined benefit plans. Number 2. Compute the net defined benefit liability or assets. Number 3. State the components of a defined benefit cost. And describe the accounting for long-term employee benefit and termination of benefits. The accounting for defined benefit plan is a bit complicated because of the presence of actuarial assumption required to measure obligation and the expense, and there is a possibility of actual gains and losses. So you have to compute yung time value of money. That's why you need to consider the actuarial assumption because it involves not only current period but also future periods. So mahaba-habang uh, benefit plan ito. So it will take how many years? So very substantial or very important yung adjustment for time value of money. That's why we need actuarial assumption. And of course, since merong estimate, there will be a possible gains and losses. Obligations are measured on a discounted basis kasi nga we have to we have to compute the present values of the defined benefit plan. Accounting procedures for defined benefit plan. So, merong step-by-step procedure dito sa defined benefit plan. So, step number 1 is to determine the deficit or the surplus. Deficit pag negative, surplus pag positive, sumobra. And yung deficit at surplus is simply determined using by comparing yung present value of planned asset saka present value of defined benefit obligation. So present value of planned assets or FDPA minus present value of defined benefit obligation PB of DBO is equal to surplus or deficit. Yung PB of DBO, present value of defined benefit obligation is the accumulated liability ng ng company for the benefits earned by the employee to date. So since sa inception ng plan hanggang yung current. So kailangan i-recognize na yun as liability. While yung FBPA naman, yung future value of plan assets is yung balance ng fund na sinet aside na ng company para pambayad sa retirement benefit. So, yan na yung balance ng fund na sineset aside. So, ulitin lang natin. Gusto ko lang i-emphasize if yung FBPA is less than the PB of DBO, then mayroon tayong deficit. Pero kapag ang FBPA is greater than the present value of the defined benefit obligation, then we will have a surplus. Step number 2 is to determine the net defined benefit liability or net defined benefit asset. So, syempre sa step 1, na-determine mo na kung may deficit or surplus. Ngayon, sa step 2, kung mayroon daw siyang deficit, the deficit is the net benefit liability. So, syempre nga, kulang nga yung sinet aside, kinompare mo yung future value of asset versus yung present value of obligation, defined benefit obligation. So, may deficit. So, may kulang. So, magre-recognize ka ng additional liability kasi mas mababa yung present value of DBO, yung sa obligation. So, mas mababa. So, may additional liability. So, mas simple siya kapag may deficit. Pero, on the other hand, kapag surplus naman ang na-compute mo, the net defined benefit asset is lower than the surplus and the asset ceiling. So, kung may surplus, yung net defined asset is the lower of the surplus and the asset ceiling. So, i-compare mo pa yung surplus at saka asset ceiling. So, kung ano yung mas mababa sa kanila, yun yung i-recognize mo as net defined benefit asset. So, ano naman yung asset ceiling? It is the present value on any economic benefits available in the form of refunds from the plan or reduction in the future contribution plan. So, yun yung asset ceiling. So, hopefully, mas magiging clear ang picture pag na-i-apply na natin itong concept na ito sa problem. Step number 3, determine the defined benefit costs. So, yung total defined benefit cost is composed of 3. Yung service costs, net interest in the defined benefit liability or assets, and remeasurements of net defined benefit liability or asset. So, please take note na yung service cost at saka yung net interest on the net defined benefit liability or assets is both recognized in the profit and loss statement. While yung remeasurement, siya ang hihiwalay at i-recognize as other comprehensive income sa baba. After na ng income from operation, after ng profit or loss. Diba? Doon sa last part ng statement of comprehensive income, merong other comprehensive income. So, doon mo yun ilalagay. Hindi sa body ng income statement or ng profit and loss statement. So, yung service cost is composed of current service costs, past service costs, and any gain or loss on settlement. While yung net interest on defined liability benefit asset and liability is composed of interest on the defined benefit obligation, interest income on plan assets, interest on the effect of the asset ceiling. And finally, sa remeasurement naman on the net defined benefit liability, it includes actuarial gains and losses, difference between interest income on plan assets and return on plan assets, difference between the interest on the effect of the asset ceiling and the change in the effect of the asset ceiling. So, altogether, yun yung component ng total defined benefit costs. So, ito naman will be discussed sa next slide, yung mga components ng step 3. Yan. So, let's discuss yung item dun sa next slide, one by one. So, unahin na natin yung current service costs. Current service cost is the increase in the present value of defined benefit obligation resulting from the employee service in the current period. Ito yung benefit corresponding dun sa current period, yung ngayon. Yung i-contribute nung company dun sa benefits, plan benefits ng mga employee for this period. Kaya nga current service cost applicable dun sa current year. And then of course, kung may current service cost, yung services na ni-render nila for this year, mayroon ding tinatawag natin past service cost. So mayroon pa ding i-contribute yung company para sa mga services na render na noon, previously, ng employee. So past service cost is the change in the present value of the defined benefit obligation resulting from a plan amendment or curtailment. And then, yung gain or loss on settlement is the difference between the present value of defined benefit obligation and the settlement price. So, compare mo lang, diba? So, magkano na ba yung present value niya versus yung settlement price. So, yan yung simply, ma-determine mo lang gain or loss. Kukunin mo lang yung difference. Interest cost on the defined benefit obligation is simply the increase during a period in the present value of a defined benefit obligation, which arises because the benefits are one period closer to the settlement. Siyempre, na mayroon kasing period na nag-lapse. Diba? So, mag-a-adjust yung present value nung defined benefit obligation. So, as a result, magkakaroon ng difference. So, i-recognize mo yan as interest cost. Number 5, actuarial gains and losses are the changes in the present value of the defined benefit obligation resulting from experience adjustment and the effect of changes in actuarial assumption. So, nagkakaroon ng actuarial gains and losses dahil mayroong changes sa assumption ng actuary. It is very common kasi nga it is an assumption. So, it is subject to changes. Assumption nga. So, kapag naiba yung mga pag iba yung pinag-basean doon sa assumption, siyempre mag-iba. That's why it is normal na magkaroon dapat ng adjustment kasi nagkaroon ng changes sa assumption. Actuarial assumption. So, although ang actuarial assumption ay assumption lang, pero actually, this is the entity's best estimate of the variables that will determine the ultimate cost of providing the post-employment benefits. So, ito yung pinaka-reliable naman. Although, estimate lang siya, assumption lang siya, pero ito na yung pinaka most reliable kasi nga ginamitan siya ng science. pamamagitan ng mga actuarial assumptions. So, kinonsider na lahat nito. It is very scientific way of projecting kung magkano yung magiging value niya. So, number one, demographic assumption. So, assumption about the future uh, characteristic of employees who are eligible for benefits. The demographic assumptions deal with matters such as ayun, so ito yung kino-consider sa demographic assumption. Letter A, mortality, both during and after the employment. Mortality, ibig sabihin yung sa pagkamatay. Kailan siya mamamatay? So, i-assume din yan. Rates of employee turnover, disability, and early retirement. So, consider lahat, di ba? So, yung rates ng employee turnover, ilan ba ang employee na umaalis? Siyempre, pag umalis sila, baka hindi na sila magiging entitled ng benefit, disability. Yan, pag disabled sila, siyempre, aalis na din. And baka magbigay na ng benefit na mas maaga. And early retirement, sino ba ang mag-a-avail ng early retirement? So, at that time, syempre, hindi pa sure kung sino ang mag-a-avail ng early retirement. Letter C, the proportion of plan members with dependents who will be eligible for the benefits. Ilan ba yung ratio ng plan members with dependents? Sino yung mga may dependents? Letter D, claim rates under the medical plan. So, yung ratio ng nag-claim talaga sa medical plan. Number 2, financial assumption. Ito naman yung mga financial matters na kino-consider sa actuarial assumption. The discount rates, future salary and benefits level. So, kailangan din i-project yung future salaries na ng mga employee. Diba? Kasi ginagamit yung basis sa computation ng benefit. Future medical costs, if any, including cost of administering payments. And letter D, the expected rate of capital on plan asset. So, rate of return. So, yung halimbawa, syempre yung kino-contribute kasi, siniset aside yan, ini-invest, and magkano ba yung return nun? Syempre, makakatulong din sa pag-reach ng desired amount para sa benefit plan. Kung mataas yung income, so mas mabilis nilang ma-reach yung desired amount ng benefit. Pero pag mababa, syempre may risk of na hindi nila ma-reach yung so nakadepende talaga lahat sa actuarial projection. Actuarial assumption, discount rate. So the rate used to discount post-employment benefit obligations shall be determined by reference to market yields at the end of the reporting period on high-quality corporate bonds. So, ang basis sa pagdetermine ng discount rate sa actuarial assumption is yung based doon sa bond high-quality corporate bonds, yung end of the year market rate niya. However, sa mga country na walang ganung high quality corporate bonds, so ang gagamitin lang nila is the market yields at the end of the reporting period on government bonds. So yung government bonds na lang. Kung wala silang high quality corporate bonds na magamit as a reference ng discount rate na gagamitin sa computation ng actuary para i-project yung mga future value ng defined benefit obligation. Illustration on how to compute the balance at the end of a present value of defined benefit obligation. So, present value of defined benefit obligation siya, kaya liability. So, ang beginning balance niya ay nasa credit. Correct? Yes. And then, from dun sa beginning balance, i-add mo lang, kasi naka-credit din itong mga to, so ibig sabihin, add the current and past service cost, I should say. Then, i-add mo pa rin ang interest cost, yung mga interest cost, and then yung actuarial loss due to increase in present value of defined benefit obligation. So, yung tatlo, i-add mo sa beginning balance. Itong dalawa naman ang i-deduct mo, yung benefits paid, syempre nabawas kapag nabayaran na, bawas na yung obligation. So, i-debit mo na yung benefits paid. So, madideduct siya dun sa credit. And then, isa pang i-deduct is yung actuarial gain due to decrease in present value of EBO. So, parang obvious dito. Kasi nga, kung yung loss naka-add sa kabila, sa credit, ay nandoon sa credit, ibig sabihin, pag gain, syempre, ibabawas. Bakit ibabawas? Kasi nga, kapag kumita yung plan, syempre, mababawasan ang obligation. Likewise, meron din tayong illustration kung paano i-compute yung ending balance naman ng future value of plan assets. So, this is an asset. So, ibig sabihin, yung beginning balance niya nasa debit naman. Yan. So, we start sa debit. The beginning balance niya, then, idadagdag mo yung return on plan assets, yung kinita ng assets, and then, idadagdag mo yung contribution to the fund. So, pag naintindihan mo ito, more or less, hindi ka na mahihirapan sa entry natin later sa application. No? So, ulitin natin. So, i-debit mo ang return on plan assets. I-debit mo siya sa fair value of plan assets. Then, yung contribution to the fund, syempre madadagdagan niya ang assets kasi nag-contribute na naman sila sa fund. And then, ibabawas mo yung benefits paid, yung binayaran niya. Syempre, pag nagbayad ka ng benefits, ibabawas mo yan sa fair value ng plan assets equals yung ending balance ng future value of plan assets. So, I will repeat. So, most probably, mas makikita niyo yung clear picture kapag na-apply na itong mga concept na to sa problem. Kasi may i-illustrate na kung paano yung computation. So, ano ang composition ng planned assets? So, number one, assets held by a long-term employee benefit fund. Assets other than non-transferable financial instrument issued by reporting entity that are legally separate from the employer and exist solely to pay the employee benefits and are not available to employers own creditor even in case of bankruptcy. So yung planned assets parang separate talaga siya sa business. Kasi nga sabi dito, it is legally separable from the employer and nag-exist lang siya for the purpose na magbayad o magbigay ng ng benefits sa mga qualified employee, no, kapag na-reach nila yung mga qualification na mabigyan ng benefit. Most likely ito ginagamit sa retirement benefit ng employee kasi. And yung asset na sinet aside ni company, it will not be available sa creditor din kaya separate talaga ng business, no? So kaya nga naka-entrusted for payment lang ng employee benefit. Number 2, qualifying insurance policy. The proceeds of the policy can only be used to pay employee benefits and are not available to employer's own creditor and in case of bankruptcy. So, katulad din nung nauna, yung fund na sinet aside, basically the same din. Yung proceeds ng insurance na kinuha should only be used to pay yung benefits ng employee. And hindi, para masama siya sa plan assets, no? Para makasama sa plan assets yung insurance policy, kailangan para lang naka-set aside lang siya, naka-earmark lang siya, or naka-designated lang siya para sa payment ng benefit ng employee. And sabi dito, in case of bankruptcy, hindi rin siya pwedeng kunin ng creditor. Okay, so before we proceed sa other long-term employee benefits, mag-recap lang tayo para to ensure na nakakasunod pa kayo. So, sa last video natin, diniscuss natin yung 4 categories of employee benefit under PAS 19. So, yung una, diniscuss din natin sa previous slide ito, yung short-term employee benefits, yung leave, yung profit sharing bonus, etc., etc. And then we move to yung second category, which is yung post-employment benefits. Sabi ko nga, yun yung main talaga, yung main topic sa employee benefits, yung defined contribution, etc., etc. So now, we are moving to category number 3, which is yung other long-term employee benefit. So, still nasa categories pa rin tayo ng employee benefit. And yung last, mamaya, is yung termination benefits. Okay. So, ulitin natin, tapos na tayo sa short-term employee benefit. Katatapos lang natin yung, dito sa slide na to, yung post-employment benefit. So, kung nalito kayo, balikan nyo yung video. And then, so we are now about to enter yung topic na other long-term employee benefits. So, ano naman yung other long-term employee benefits? So these are employee benefits other than the post-employment benefits and termination benefits that are due to be settled within 12 months after the end of the period in which employees render the related services. So, long-term pa rin siya kasi dun sa next 12 months ng next accounting period. So, parang susunod ito sa short term. So, pagkatapos ng short term, mas mahaba ng konti. So, long term na siya kasi nga hindi sa immediately, hindi dun sa 12 months mismo, hindi dun sa accounting period mismo, dun sa next 12 months. So, long term pa rin siya. So, huwag kayo malilito. After the end of the period in which the employees render the related services. Other long-term employee benefits are accounted for using the procedure applicable for a defined benefit plan. So, parehas lang daw ang pag-account ng other long-term employee benefits. So, susundin yung defined benefit plan. However, all of the components of the net benefit costs are recognized in the profit and loss. So, yung kanina, di ba, meron tayong component ng defined benefit costs. So, lahat daw yun will be recognized na, lahat-lahat sa profit and loss na. So, walang other comprehensive income. So, ang bilis. So, nasa category 4 na tayo. Wala masyadong diniscuss sa category 3 kasi sabi nga, ang accounting procedure ay parang sa defined benefit din. So, kapag nag-discuss ulit tayo kung paano yung defined benefit, parang inulit lang natin yung category number 2. So, hindi na. Kasi na-discuss na natin sa category number 2. Ang pagkakaiba lang is yung lahat ng nandoon, yung tatlong yon ay i-recognize sa other comprehensive, hindi na i-recognize yung isa sa other comprehensive income. So, profit and loss na lahat. Okay, so move na tayo sa termination benefits. What is termination benefits? Category 4 na tayo, last na. Termination benefits are employee benefits provided in exchange for the termination of an employee's employment as a result of either, so ito yung cause kung bakit nagkakaroon ng termination. Una, entity's decision to terminate an employee's employment before the normal retirement. So, gusto na ng company na i-stop na yung pagsuserve ng employee. Hindi na pwedeng tapusin hanggang retirement. An employee's decision to accept the entity's offer of benefits in exchange for the termination of employment. And then sa other part naman, on the part of the employee, gusto na niyang tanggapin yung benefit na ino-offer nila para mag-stop na siyang mag-work. So, satisfied na siya dun sa benefit na ino-offer. So, mag-early retirement na siya. So, hindi na niya tatapusin yung hanggang sa kanyang retirement. Termination benefits measurement. Termination benefits are initially and subsequently recognized in accordance with the nature of the employee benefit. So, kung ano daw yung nature ng termination benefit, yun yung kanyang treatment. So, like, for example, sa case A natin, if the termination benefits are payable within 12 months, so within 12 months, so current yan, so ititreat mo siya as short-term employee benefits. Parang yung mga regular benefits lang ang treatment. Accounting for employee benefits lang ang treatment. No? So, actually, ito yung pinakamadali na treatment sa employee benefit, yung short-term. And of course, ang pinaka-complicated is yung post-employment benefit. Ganun na din yung other long-term benefit kasi ang sabi sa other long-term benefit, parang ganun din. Letter B, if the termination benefits are payable beyond 12 months, so hindi na siya short-term, so hindi mo na siya pwedeng gamitin, hindi mo na pwedeng gamitin pala yung short-term employee benefit concept. No? So ano ang gagamitin mo? The other long-term benefits gagamitin. And if the termination benefits in substance enhancement to post-employment benefits, so actually, kapag yung termination benefits ay enhancement lang or improvement doon sa post-employment benefits na meron yung company, then you should account yung termination benefit as post-employment benefits. Ito yung pinakamahirap. Yung accounting ng post-employment benefit. Okay, so this is the last slide. Thank you very much for watching. Kung medyo nalito kayo kasi parang two-part ito yung last video natin, no? Yung chapter 5 at saka chapter 6, no? Kasi nga employee benefit part 1 saka employee benefit part 2. So yung employee benefit part 1 at part 2 ay actually discussion ng categories of employee benefit, yung apat, no? So yung una parang doon sa first video and then the rest dito na lahat sa second video. So I am Romualdo Fernandez Credo. Pwede nyo ulit-ulitin yung video kasi it is made for you. Saying God bless.